Hello everyone, and welcome to Let's Play Sparkster for the Super Nintendo. This is technically a sequel, technically a spin-off to Rocket Knight Adventures. We're going to be playing on hard mode just because you can't access the true final boss unless you do so. And what I mean by technically a sequel and technically a spin-off is the sequel to this game, to the original Rocket Knight Adventures, is Rocket Knight Adventures 2 Sparkster on the Sega Genesis. This is the Super Nintendo version, which has entirely different stage designs, some combat mechanic changes and such. The only thing that I think is exactly the same between the two versions are the melodies for the the songs, and even then, those are still sound different enough thanks to different sound chips. Starting off, we do have a couple new abilities right off the bat. You can even see it back on the setup screen a moment ago. Sparkster now has a rolling attack by pressing R or L, which boosts you slightly forward in that direction and allows you to damage anything in your way. It's pretty good if you just want to keep the flow going and not stop while attacking. There it is, me doing it right there. It allows you just to go right through some enemies. He still has the rocket pack. However, I think not only does it charge a bit faster than the Genesis game, but it also is just a bit more useful. If you hold down when you launch, you'll still do that spin attack that can do a lot of damage really quickly. The main difference between the difficulties, though, overall, is going to be the damage you take. Though this first boss, well, mini-boss, technically, the Robo-Ape, isn't going to be much of a threat. It only jumps around, it has a very telegraphed and slow kick, and otherwise doesn't stand much of a chance against it. In fact, you saw a moment ago, it was even holding a banana. That's a full health recovery item. If you can grab it, you're not going to have much of a threat to worry about here. Every boss, every stage rather, has a mini-boss and a normal boss for us to worry about, so we're just going to go right on through after the mini-boss, and now we're in this ship. Now, I would usually do my general plot summary here from the manual, but similarly to Metal Warriors, I swear there's not a PDF of this game's manual out there. There's a PDF of the Genesis game's manual, but the plot of the Genesis game is different than the SNES game. The only thing I was able to find is that the Lion Emperor has kidnapped Princess Flora, who is, I believe, a different princess from the first game as we saw there in the intro, and is planning to use her for something. To say any more is technically spoilers because I got most of that off of the Wikipedia article for the game, because there's just that little about this game out there comparatively speaking to the Genesis version. Another new mechanic to the game, though, we've seen them thus far, those little red crystals. I don't think there was something like that in the original Rocket Knight Adventures. I could just be blanking on it, though, because I haven't played it since the LP. Essentially, those are coins from Mario. You get 100 of them, you get an extra life. And extra lives in this game are a lot easier to come by than they were in Rocket Knight Adventures from my memory. There's also quite a few more secrets. If you see an area like that that's clearly too thin of a platform, or there's no other way to get into the area behind it that you can think of or see, you can probably just dash through a wall to get to it. Alrighty though, we are getting towards the end of stage 1, got some last minute crystals for us to grab, and the boss of this stage is a bit interesting because, oh hey, Princess Flora, how are you doing? Oh damn it, Axel Gear! Yo, Sparkster, you could just boost, okay, never mind. Boss for this stage is the Mecha Dynam. I'm only just now noticing Axel Gear and Flora in that window there. The weak point for this boss is the eye there. It has a fist that will constantly jam through the floor to try and damage you. After a few hits, it starts trying to hit you with a gigantic eye laser that's surprisingly hard to dodge, and its only other main attack is to spawn these little green enemies out of its head. However, it doesn't take too many charges into the eye to take out, so overall, it's an easy boss. And that's stage 1 clear. Probably an easier first stage than Rocket Knight Adventures. However, that could also be due to the fact I'm only playing on hard mode and not one of the hardest difficulties like it was in the original Rocket Knight Adventures, just due to the fact that that was one of those games that swapped the difficulties around for some reason in the American version. And now we're in stage 2, the Ironworks. Now, in this stage is the first place where it can really come into play. But a minor, not nerf, but change to Sparkster's moveset is with the rocket boost. From my memory at least, in Rocket Knight Adventures, when you rocket straight in the air, you have still full control of yourself. In this game, when you rocket straight up in the air, you may have even seen it. You can see it for a couple frames over here and there when I'm boosting around in midair. He kind of panics in the air like, oh god, I'm falling. When you're doing that, you can only control your left to right direction. You can't control anything else like another boost. In order to gain that control back without touching the ground, you need to do an L or R roll, because that will just allow you to, well, move again. You can also use the L and R roll to cancel out of rocket boosts, which can be very useful to get to certain little secret areas that might be on top of a room or something. Now, partially just due to the fact I'm slightly less familiar with this game than some of the other Rocket Knight games, and by that I mean than the original. You're gonna see me fumbling about a bit more in the earlier levels just because I'm not as used to the controls still. Because even though I did a test playthrough of this one right before it, it had still been quite some time since I had last played SNES Sparkster. Although I gotta say, I love this soundtrack. As I mentioned earlier, the Genesis version has the exact same soundtrack, and while I think it's a good soundtrack on the Genesis, I think this is one of those songs that works, or at least one of those soundtracks overall, rather, that generally works better on the Super Nintendo sound chip, especially with this song in particular, because it's very Mega Man X3 only, you know, good. Now, the lava here isn't instant death. One thing you do want to watch out for, especially from here on, is dashing forward into those little rolling things there. Those things smush you to about the thickness of a piece of paper, and that is instant kill, so you want to watch out for that. Getting crushed in general is instant kill, so you want to also be careful of anything coming out of the ceiling. Now, one thing I can say that is good about playing this game on hard mode is that I think they do a good job at spacing out the health power-ups in this game compared to some of the other games I've played on the channel. However, the amount of damage enemies do can still be kind of ridiculous towards endgame. And I'm not saying, like, endgame enemies shouldn't do more damage, especially boss fights, but I'm talking, like, they could do upwards of a heart, and that can be kind of bad in a game where you have so little health. What that was right there was an extra life, but also not... Also, we're painted red here. I don't think this does anything. The thing is with extra life bubbles like that is that if you attack them, they become a roulette. And I'm not entirely certain how the roulette works. I know it can be either up to 3 lives or... I want to say either a full apple, which is a full health, a full heart recovery, or a half apple, which is half a heart recovery. I want to say whenever you start the roulette, what it's going to be is selected from then, but it might be also a case of whatever frame it's on, you get that. However, I rarely ever get good luck out of it, so yeah. And now it's time for one of the hardest bosses in the game. This is the junk machine. The way this thing works is that while it comes in from the right, on the conveyor belt on the ground, several weapons can spawn for it they can grab with either arm. The rectangle is a giant missile launcher that fires a big volley of homing missiles at you. There's a spike ball which it just chucks straight at your head. The most annoying thing for it to grab is probably that thing right there that you just saw, which is this giant, almost like dual-edged mace that it just flings around like nobody's business, and it's really hard to dodge. It can also just fire projectiles out of its hand, and I think there's just an outright little laser blaster it can get, but depending on RNG, this fight can be very hard to not get hit in, while also very hard to hit it. The place you need to hit, by the way, if it wasn't obvious, is the giant yellow light on the top. I got some pretty good luck there, all things considered, because I didn't even grab the weird little dual-edged mace thing. But that fight can be very hard, depending on what it decides to grab. My best bet for you would probably be to hope that it spawns either just some of the spike balls or the blaster. And now for Stage 3. This is Stampy Doo, I believe? The way this works is that this stage is outright an auto-scroller. For those who played Rocket Knight Adventures, it's a bit like the end of, I forget if it was the end of Stage 1 or Stage 2, with the random overwater shmup section. This is that again, only we have full control over this bird. We can make ourselves go higher by holding up, duck down by pressing down, and by pressing the attack button, you can fire a pretty decently sized projectile. You can also just jump outright out of the bird and attack with Sparkster himself, or use his rocket pack. The bird follows you no matter where you go, though, so you don't need to worry about falling into any bottomless pits. You just need to worry about what's around you and not get hit. This stage is pretty fun, however, it also gets a bit obscenely fast and hard to tell what's going on, because the amount of enemies that the stage likes to throw at you can get a bit ridiculous later on. I'm surprised this bird is running this fast without its legs breaking, because that is quite the blur of sprites. In fact, I'm wondering if compression is even picking up every single frame. It's probably not. Every now and then, though, you do duck off the bird and get thrown right onto another. During this little section here, I recommend just outright holding down, because there's these weird little spiders on the top of the screen after every layer that just dip down to try and hit you. However, if you duck down, you cannot get hit by them. We also have the random mini-boss here, which I think this is like the Wolfheim robot or something. This thing is a bit weird in that it's running around. The arms are a hitbox, it's waving them around like it just doesn't care, and I think the wolf on top can just randomly throw stuff at you, too. Overall, though, as you can see, not a very threatening mini-boss. Though, god damn, that man ran fast. From here on in the stage, I just recommend holding down to avoid any potential issues. Though there is one thing you need to watch out for, and I think 2 passes of a Sparkster. And that's that we don't get thrown immediately onto another bird. We're thrown into a fairly large vertical shaft that you have to rocket down and hopefully not get hit by any bats like that, because that's really hard to see coming, by the way. Head all the way to the right of the screen here, by the way, because the bridge collapses in the same order, and if you're not on the right side of the screen, you will die. And now we got this section. We got these weird little green cloud enemies that are running from either side, or I guess swinging from either side of the screen and firing bombs out. You're just going to want to jump out with Sparkster and you do a standard sword slash, because Sparkster's sword still has the little projectile effect to it. And unlike Rocket Knight Adventures, I believe, where it went across maybe half the screen, it goes across most of the screen here. And it's time for the boss of this stage, the Robot Crawler. This boss is also fairly annoying. We can't damage the boss itself for right now, instead we can damage the sections of the body. However, when we destroy them enough, they fall off the body and onto the floor, where they'll not only slide along the floor, but they'll also get flung by any hills, be it into you or away from you. The first few don't have any real attacks, but once you start seeing ones with little jets like that one that's right below me right now, you have potential damage coming your way. What I recommend doing is whenever you have a section fall off the bot, duck down with the bird and hope either a hill comes up that'll make it jump, or just mash the fire button and hope you can destroy it in time. It's not the hardest to avoid, especially on lower difficulties where your HP is technically increased or the damage to the enemy is decreased, but yeah. This fight can be kind of annoying, and you also want to jump in the case you're like holding yourself up just so you don't get flung right into the bombs that the Robot Crawler itself throws. Though I think it can also occasionally throw apples. Once you reach phase 2 after you've destroyed enough sections, it just bounces around on the floor trying to do a little fireball at you. What I recommend doing there is maybe firing 2 shots with the bird and then alternating with a rocket charge into it to potentially avoid any fire. 3 shots with the bird at most. But with that, I'm going to need to end this off here. Thank you guys for watching, and in part 2, we'll be heading into the second third of the game. See you guys then.